Thank you very much for listening to this week's talk on the sedra of Beshalach, the fourth sedra in the book of Shemos. And we dedicate this learning in gratitude to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to Hashem, that we have merited to see the return of the last remaining hostage in Gaza, Ran Gvili, hero of Alumim, Kibbutz Alumim, has been rescued and please God, will have Keva Yisrael, Jewish burial in his hometown tomorrow, Wednesday at 12:30. And as we reflect on the events that we're living through and look at the sedra, it is just breathtaking how we are living through events and themes and words that were recorded and given to us thousands of years ago. And we can start by looking at the fact that before we read about the splitting of the Reed Sea that this sedra is so famous for, the nature changing miracle of that particular that event. But when we look at the beginning of the sedra, we see that chapter 13 verse 19, Vayikach Moshe es atzmos Yosef imo, and Moshe took Yosef's bones with him. And we've mentioned this before, but at the end of the book of Bereshis, Yosef HaTzadik asks his brothers to ensure that when the time for redemption comes, he is not left behind, forgotten in the land of Egypt, but brought back to the ancestral homeland of the Jewish people. And Moshe Rabbeinu is the one who makes sure that this is the top of his list of priorities. And as we think about the raw miracles in the sedra of Beshalach, which are not necessarily apparent in such an open way constantly, but we can look at the conduct of Moshe Rabbeinu. We can look at the priorities that he has in making sure that this promise to Yosef HaTzadik was honored. And that was his priority. That was his focus. And he achieved that. And when we see the extraordinary efforts that the people of Israel have gone to today to make sure that every single hostage was returned, at a cost, at a huge cost in terms of lives, in terms of soldiers who have been wounded in this operation, in terms of pushing back against pressure when it was felt that it wasn't possible to achieve this result. And really we see that the people of Israel and the brave soldiers, with God's help, have achieved this extraordinary result. And I think that we take a lesson from Moshe Rabbeinu and we look at the fact that he is prioritizing making sure that Yosef HaTzadik was not left behind. And we see how today these values have translated into the actions of a nation. And when we flip forward, you think about Ran Gvili and how on that fateful day of Simchas Torah 2.5 years ago, Ran Gvili was actually awaiting surgery. He was not supposed to be on duty. And when he heard that something is going on, he discharged himself from hospital and he went down south, and he was in this posters that have been adorning the streets in Israel. Ran Gvili, Israel is waiting for you, and he's called Magen Alumim, the defender of the kibbutz of Alumim. And this is really the quality of Nachshon ben Aminadav. And when we look at the story, the event of the splitting of the Reed Sea, and the Jewish people are in an impossible situation on the face of it. The Egyptian army is chasing up on them, and behind them, in front of them, there is the Reed Sea, and they are paralyzed, they're frozen, and Nachshon ben Aminadov jumps into the water, and it's become an expression in Ivrit, in modern Hebrew, that to be a Nachshon is somebody who takes the plunge, who takes the initiative, who jumps in when other people are, for whatever reason, hesitating. And we can see that Ran Gvili, along with many others, but Ran Gvili is the emblem as the hostage who was, they say, the first in, the last out. But he displays the qualities of Nachshon ben Aminadov, along with so many other people in our nation that we are so blessed to have, of people who are taking initiative to protect, to defend, to carry out Hashem's work, and in this way bring the words of the Torah into the present tense and going forward as well. So I think that is the first way that we can seize the momentous events of this week's sedra and hold on to them, because it can be very easy to fall into a trap of thinking that these are the historical events and we can't see it happening in our times. But built into the sedra, we have got real tools and tactics to stop that happening. And then the next thing that we look at as on the verge of on the shores, on the banks of the Red Sea, that the Jewish people are wondering, how do they go forward? And Moshe Rabbeinu tells them, don't worry, Hashem will do your work, and you just stay there. But actually Hashem says, no, you need to take action. You need to move forward. And again, this is a message to all of us in our lives, that when sometimes we are confronted with choices and we don't know what is the right thing to do, if we just carry on going forward within the guidelines of the Torah, one mitzvah at a time, one more light, one more good deed at a time, one more, however we can bring the words and values of the Torah into our lives, into our world, especially at these times of crisis, as the Jewish people were faced with at the time, as they are on the verge of the Red Sea, the Red Sea. And then if we look at other themes of the Sedra that don't necessarily seem at first sight to merge seamlessly with that epic event of the splitting of the Red Sea. And I'm referring particularly to the mitzvah of Shabbos, which we received in the Sedra, and also the concept that the splitting of the Red Sea is considered as hard as earning our parnasa, earning our daily living, and finding a match, finding people's soulmates, enabling them to set up Jewish homes. And it's to try to connect these themes, that how can it be that something that is a one-off event of the magnitude of splitting of the Red Sea is connected to something like earning our daily bread, which seems to be a very natural daily grind kind of event, or even finding one's life's partner, which again, wouldn't necessarily seem to be on the scale of the epic miracle of the splitting of the Red Sea. But the message that we are learning is that these events that happen regularly are opportunities for us to see the miraculous workings of Hashem, even in the ordinary. The ordinary is effectively extraordinary. And with regards to Shabbos, again, a lesson, a message that comes out of the events that we're experiencing now. In an interview with the released hostage, Omer Shem Tov, the interviewer is asking Omer about the fact that he started observing Shabbat in captivity, and the interviewer, trying to lighten the tone somewhat, asks, makes a joke to say, okay, it's not like you could go on a Jeep tour, you didn't have anything else to do, so it couldn't have been that hard for you to keep Shabbat. So, in a very good-natured response, Omer answers him and he says, well, actually, at the beginning of the captivity, he was together with another hostage, and they were in the tunnels. It was very dark, but they had a torch, they had a flashlight, and they had each other, they had this flashlight, so it eased the trauma and the very harsh conditions of their captivity. After a relatively short time, the other person was released from captivity, and Omer was left alone, and he had his torch, but he was otherwise alone. And he took upon himself, as he was keeping Shabbat, that he was not going to use the torch on Shabbat. And really, in this way, the depth of his commitment, the Mesirat Nefesh in those circumstances of how he held on to Shabbat, and really that when we see at the time of Kriyat Yam Suf in the Sedra that we read that this is where we get the mitzvah of Shabbat, this is something that we can take inspiration from our heroes of today. And this is the such a vital message, and how with the gift of Shabbat on a weekly basis, again, we stand back and we look at creation, we look at the miracle of our existence, and we see everything as extraordinary. And with that level of appreciation, with that level of gratitude, we are able to live elevated lives. And there is the fact that the rabbis find the only allusion in the Torah to the revival of the dead in the story of in the words of the Shirat Hayam, because the technical reason given is that the opening words, Az Yashir Moshe, then Moshe will sing, that is in the future tense, and technically they should have been in the past tense. But the fact this is taken as an allusion to in the future, when Moshe Rabbeinu, at the time of the revival of the dead, will sing Shira. And this is really something that, in the same way that we believe that Hashem, at the point of Kriyat Yam Suf, he suspended, there was no such thing as nature. There was no veils behind Hashem and his involvement in the world and how everything comes from Hashem. There was complete transparency, to the extent that every single person of the Bnei Yisrael achieved this level of prophetic vision. And this is something that when we think of Tchiyat HaMesim, that is the same level of faith. Just like Hashem made the Red Sea split at that particular time as part of the salvation of Am Yisrael, similarly, with Tchiyat HaMesim, this belief that that all of those who have passed will live again, and anything is possible for Hashem. And this is emunah that we learn from the words of this week's sedra, from the events of this week's sedra, and just continuing to develop this theme. There is the extraordinary, everything is extraordinary, but the extraordinary fact that Tu B'Shvat, the 15th day of Shvat, is always read around this time, around the time of Shabbat Shira, of the reading of the Sedra of Beshalach. And again, in that regular cycle of the year, of the rebirth and the renewal of the natural world, that we see that is as epic as the splitting of the Reed Sea, and that is something that we use as a way to connect our faith, connect our rhythm to the creator of the world. And everything, all of these themes taken together, are the most powerful infusion of faith and courage and hope, and dedicating this to all of the Nachshons of our nation. And we have been blessed with so many of them. And they have paid such a high price, and we continue to pay this price. But this is what makes us the people of Hashem, and this is what gives us courage and inspiration to carry on going towards that future redemption, the Techiyat HaMesim, the revival of the dead, and the prophecies of the words of the Torah that, please God, we should merit to see come true speedily in our times. Thank you very much for listening, and wishing everybody Shabbat Shalom.